Hi, readers. I'm so glad you joined me again as we finish a little bit more of The Wild Robot Escapes. Now, for those of you who don't know about The Wild Robot, I suggest you go to the first book, The Wild Robot. But the rest of us have started The Wild Robot Escapes. And as we know, the lovable robot, was last seen being ripped away from her goose son, Brightbill, and hauled unwillingly back to the factory for the makers to repair and reassign her. She is reactivated on the Hilltop Farm, where Mr. Sharif expects her to tend to farm duties, including caring for many cows and making repairs around the farm. She is programmed to obey orders, including those from Mr. Sharif's children, Jaya and Jad. Roz is homesick for her prior life on the remote island with her goose son and all of the other animal friends, but she feels trapped and fears Mr. Sharif will find out her secret, that she really is defective. At least, what does defective mean, right? And that she's able to think and plan and speak the language of the animals. Roz is torn. While she enjoys her life on the farm, spending time with the children, she desires a reunion with her son even more. With the children's help and blessing, and the cow's assistance, Roz develops an escape plan. I love this book where science fiction meets fantasy in this sequel, which means the next book, that gives you readers a unique look, I think, at what technology could someday have in store for us. And it also explores the nature of what is our purpose? And I think those are all very interesting questions. Join me as I start reading from chapter 48. Chapter 48, The Return. The robot's feelings of worry and confusion and guilt went away as soon as she heard her son's voice echoing across the farm. "Ma, we're back!" Brightbill's flock appeared above the pasture, flapping and honking and laughing. They glided down to Roz, and Brightbill took his place on his mother's shoulder. "I told you we'd keep your son out of trouble," squawked Loudwing. "Thank you, everyone," the robot spoke in her most cheerful voice. "It is so good to see all of you again." The cows trotted over, grinning and happily mooing to the geese. While the herd and the flock caught up with each other, Roz and Brightbill slipped away to speak privately. "What's the plan, Ma?" "The plan is simple," said Roz. "Tonight, under the cover of darkness, I will run away from this farm, and then you and I will begin our journey home." Chapter 49, The Goodbyes. That evening was full of sad goodbyes. The first goodbye was between the flock and their young leader. The other geese wanted to help Roz and Brightbill get home, but the journey would be dangerous, and Brightbill refused to put his flock at risk. He demanded they return to the island without him. The geese could feel their instincts urging them onward, and they knew Roz and Brightbill would look after each other. So they said their goodbyes and took off into the night sky. The next goodbye was between the robot and the cows. Roz marched into the pasture one last time as the herd gathered around. "I guess this is it," said the robot. "Thank you all for being so kind to me." Annabelle sniffled and said, "I really hate goodbyes, but I'm glad you're going home where you belong. I just wish there was some way I could be helpful." "Actually, there is something you can do." Roz unsnapped a pocket of her tool belt and took out the transmitter. "You can hold on to this for me. Hopefully it will take a few days for Mr. Sharif to realize I am gone." Annabelle smiled as the robot gently tucked the small device under her collar. Lily and the other cats suddenly swarmed around Noz and nuzzled her legs. They all had tears in their eyes. Tess wanted to lighten the mood, but she couldn't think of anything funny to say. The other cows called out to their friend, "We'll miss you, Roz. Get home safely. Don't forget about us." Roz waved to the herd, and she said a silent goodbye to all the farm machines parked in the shed. Then she followed the driveway out to the fields, with Brightbill on her shoulder and the children at her side. The last goodbye was the hardest of all. Everyone was quiet as they walked through the silvery moonlight, past rows and rows of sprouting crops, and out to the farthest corner of the farthest field. Roz turned and faced Jay and Jad. She looked past them, past to the distant lights of the farm buildings. "I have prepared the farm for my departure," said Roz. "It will take care of itself for a while, but not forever." We can manage things, at least until we get another robot, said Jad. This place won't be the same without you, but we'll be okay. What will you tell your father? Said Roz. That's for us to worry about, said Jaya. You just worry about getting home. Roz glanced down at the tool belt strapped across her chest. Would you like this back? No, we would not, said Jad. It was a gift just for you, said Jaya. The girl pulled her brother and her robot into a big, tight hug. Beneath the sounds of the crickets were the sounds of the children crying. How will we know you've made it home? Said Jaya. We need to know how your story ends, said Jaya. The robot muttered some animal words to her son and then said to the children, If a goose ever visits this farm and presents you with a feather, you will know that I am home. The children smiled through their tears and waited for their friends to leave. But the robot didn't move. More than anything, Roz wanted to go home, and yet she was conflicted. She cared about this family and this farm, and now she was abandoning them. The robot lurched forward, then backward, and again as her computer brain struggled with all of these thoughts and feelings. Finally, the children gave her the gentle push she needed. Roz, we order you to run away. And the robot did, as she was told. Chapter 50, The Free Robot. At long last, Roz was free, but as she ran away from Hilltop Farm, she didn't feel free. She felt something more like fear. She feared being seen and captured and destroyed. She feared for her son's safety. So Roz camouflaged herself. She avoided the fields and kept to the trees. With Brightbill as her guide, she carefully crept north through farm country. The wild robot's long journey home had begun. Chapter 51, The Airship. The sun was up and our friends were on the move. They were traveling quickly and quietly along a narrow strip of forest that cut between vast crop fields. If for not that nagging fear of being spotted, it would have been a very pleasant hike. Wind whispered through the leaves, insects hummed and chirped, farm machines rumbled in the distance, and then there came a new sound, a buzzing sound. Our friends hid in the underbush as an airship rose up from the horizon ahead of them. It was a sleek white triangle, flying low and fast. Roz adjusted her vision and saw familiar robots gazing out from the front window. Rico 1, Rico 2, and Rico 3 had been destroyed back on the island. Perhaps these robots were Ricos 4, 5, and 6. The airship disappeared to the south, and the travelers continued north at a faster pace. They hurried through more strips of forest, passing squirrels and birds and groundhogs and other friendly creatures, but the robot and the goose had no time to chat. Later that day, the trees came to an abrupt end. Roz and Brightbill stood at the forest edge and faced an ocean of wheat. The wheat was still young and green. It gently waved in the wind and spread out as far as they could see. What should we do? Asked Brightbill. We need to keep moving, said Roz, staring across the plains. But I am not safe in the open. There must be more trees out there somewhere. I'll take a look, said Brightbill, and the goose launched himself skyward. Up, up, up he went, high into the air, until he finally stopped and floated, just a tiny winged shape against the blue, and then he dove back down to his mother. There are trees in that direction, said Brightbill, pointing. It's far, about 30 minutes at top speed. Then we had better get started, said Roz. Then our friends burst out from the underbrush, the robot sprinting through the field, the goose flying by her side. Roz had to concentrate to keep from slipping in the soft, muddy soil, but she stomped on, and far ahead another line of trees slowly climbed into view. Brightbill suddenly swooped up and out of sight as his mother kept running. Then he lowered back down beside her and squawked, "The airship is returning!" Behind them, a tiny white triangle rose up from the horizon. It was growing larger and louder by the second. If Roz was seen, her newfound freedom and her life would be over. She couldn't take any chances. "Go on without me," hollered the robot as she dropped to the ground. Brightbill hoped his mother knew what she was doing, and he flew on without her. Once he reached the trees, he perched himself on a branch and looked back. His mother had vanished. The airship, however, seemed to fill the sky. Its shadow flitted across the ground where Roz had just been, but the ship didn't see her, and it detected no electronic signal, so it kept going, racing above the trees and over the next field. Its engine noise gradually faded, and it disappeared to the north. "You can come out, Ma," squawked Brightbill from his branch. A column of wheat stood up in the field. The robot had rushed her camouflage, and it crumbled off her body when she started to march. As she approached the trees, Roz looked at Brightbill in the branches and said, "We need to keep moving." You knew camouflage was going to come in there. All her skills she learned on the island. Chapter 52. The Scout. Would the airship return? Were the Ricos hunting for Roz? Was it only a matter of time before she was caught? It was impossible to know, so our friends tried not to worry about those troubling questions as they continued sneaking through farm country from one wooded area to the next. Roz wore a disguise of mud and weeds and bark. At the first hint of trouble, she would freeze and instantly become a rotten old tree trunk. Then she'd wait for Brightbill to tell her that it was safe to move on. If there were humans or robots nearby, she might have to wait for hours. Back on the island, Brightbill had practiced flying like hawks and owls and sparrows and vultures. He couldn't fly like those other birds, of course, but he was an expert at diving and swooping and darting and soaring. Now he used those skills to secretly scout out the countryside for his mother. He'd fly up from her shoulder and return a short time later to share his findings. "We're coming to another farmhouse. Let's avoid it by cutting across this field. Beyond these trees is a highway. Stay here and I'll tell you when it's safe to cross. Straight ahead is a small town, but I can lead you around it." Brightbill's advice was always good, and Roz always followed it, and together the travelers safely made their way through the farm country. Chapter 53. The Farm Country. During their travels, our friends passed every kind of farm imaginable. Some farms grew crops in vast fields and orchards. Others grew crops in great glimmering greenhouses. Some farms let their animals graze through open pastures. Others kept their animals confined to small enclosures. Some farms had old-fashioned barns and sheds. Others had modern laboratories that made meat, eggs, and milk without any animals at all. There seemed to be an infinite number of ways to produce food for humans. The farms were teeming with robot workers, and Roz couldn't resist spying on them as she carefully slunk past. The robots worked the fields and machines and livestock, their bodies shining in the sun, shimmering in the heat. This must have been how Roz looked back on Hilltop Farm. Were any of these robots like her? Were any of them quietly dreaming of escape? Or were they all just mindless machines, content with their place in the world? Chapter 54. The Mountains. The flat plains of farm country gradually rolled into hills and valleys. There were fewer crop fields and more forests. The hills grew taller. The valleys sank deeper. The farms disappeared entirely. Our friends had reached the mountains. Brightbill floated on the wind as Roz climbed the slopes. They passed craggy rock formations and rushing waterfalls and meadows lush with flowers. The robot could have hiked on, never slowing or stopping, but the goose needed to rest. As the stars came out each evening, they found a safe location to settle down. Frost was common in the higher regions, and Roz took the lighter from her tool belt and built small campfires to keep her son warm. They sat around the crackling flames, reminiscing about life on the island until Brightbill drifted off to sleep. As the sun came up each morning, they'd clear away all traces of their campsite and set off again, deeper into the mountains. Eagles perched on jagged cliffs. Fish splashed through gurgling streams. Chipmunks bickered in the thick undergrowth. It felt good to be back in wilderness. But this place wasn't home. so the travelers kept a brisk pace. The robot adjusted her camouflage to match her surroundings. In the forest, she wore leaves and tree bark. In the meadows, she wore grass and wildflowers. In the rocky terrain, she wore dirt and weeds. Even way out there in the wilderness, she wanted to go unseen. What Roz didn't realize was that she was already being watched. I wish I could ask you to make some predictions at this point. I do so miss our library time and hearing your insights and your ideas and what you think may happen next. Who do you suspect is watching her? Who or what? I invite you to join me next time as we continue with The Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. We'll begin with chapter 55, The Attack. And I'm sure you'll all be wanting to know who is watching Brightbill and his robot mother escape. Sandy Vase readers, keep reading, and don't forget to visit my library page for more read-alouds and free ebooks. And remember, I'm always available if you want to email me to request a special book. My email is maerki@aps.edu. And I look forward to the next time we get to sit down and enjoy a book together. Take care of yourselves and know that we miss you, and we'll be together soon.